Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I am here with.
Lynne Hardy, the line editor for Rivers of London role-playing game at Chaosium, and the senior associate editor for Call of Cthulhu.
And today we're going to talk about The Order of the Stone, the newest Call of Cthulhu adventure source book coming out this year. That's very exciting. It almost came out of, I don't know if it's been announced previously, but this took me by surprise. A good surprise, of course. Did you win an Emmy recently for your work for Rivers of London?
I did, yes. The Domestic won the Gold Ennie for Best Free Game or Product this year at the Ennies at Gen Con. And that's the free solo adventure that was written by Gavin Inglis for us based on Ben Aronovich's short story of the same name.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
But yes, today we're going to talk about the Order of the Stone. So first things first, let's talk about the origins of this. How do you recall how this idea came to be?
This was actually one that had been in the vaults for quite a while, as far as I'm aware. So Jared Twing wrote the original pitch, and then, as quite often happens, these things kind of get put to one side and put away nice and safely until someone's ready to work on them. Because obviously for a long time it was Mike on his own, Mike Mason, and then I came along to help out. And then over the last year, 18 months, we've expanded quite dramatically. So there's now me, Harris MacDonald, James Cocolat, and Paul Fricker on the editing thing. But I've kind of moved away as Rivers of London has developed more. So that's why I've stuck senior in there, because I've been doing it the longest. I promoted myself. So interestingly, Order of the Stone was the last big Call of Cthulhu thing that I worked on before pretty much transferring full time to Rivers of London. I still do bits and bobs for Call of Cthulhu when Mike needs me, but my focus is now my line. So this had been sitting around. It had a different name. It was originally called The Three Urns, and Paul Fricker did some development work on it. And then after I'd got the Rivers of London rulebook out of the gate, I then started work on this one, polishing it, rearranging bits, a little bit more development to do, as you say, to make sure that it was presented in a manner that was easy to follow and interesting and entertaining for our players.
If I may ask, I know can't spoil too much, but what is the premise behind the Order of the Stone?
Naughty archaeologists sticking their mitts into things that they really shouldn't, which is, a good staple of a Call of Cthulhu adventure.
I love how sometimes archaeologists, in trying to discover the past, end up destroying our future.
That's potentially very much the case with this. It sort of starts in a soggy field in Ireland where a small boy trips over something, makes an archaeological discovery. Miskatonic University get involved for a variety of reasons, and it all goes horribly wrong from there, basically.
So I know you've worked on so many projects before working on this one. Was there anything different that you had to do, or any research you had to do that was different from your previous works?
Oh, this one. The first scenario is set on an ocean liner.
Oh,
So that's how the investigators are hooked into the campaign. All the stuff in Ireland is in the background. That's the setup. The first scenario is the investigators are called to investigate why this particular ship isn't answering calls. It's due into harbour at Boston, and nobody can get anything out of it. So there are a variety of routes that the investigators can be recruited through, including through Miskatonic University. So I had to do a lot of research about the ship that it's based on, which was the Lusitania. So you're not on the Lusitania in the scenario; it's something. It's a different ship. But the deck plans were the Lusitania, so I had to spend some time finding deck plans. Thankfully, there are a lot of online resources that are available for that. Finding archive pictures of the Lusitania, so we had them for art references. Annotating the plans and simplifying them in a way that Riku Simula, who did the maps for this and the handouts, could actually turn it into something usable for the keeper and players. Because Ocean liners are really complicated things.
Really, even the back in the 1920s.
Oh, yes. I mean, these things were, even then, floating hotels, particularly things like the Lusitania and the Mauretania, they were really high class things. Yes, they did have third class and steerage, but the first class and second class facilities were good. And of course, you still had to have a gigantic kitchen and storage for feeding all of these people as you go over the ocean, and places to put stuff. We did take a deck out just to try and simplify things, but no, they're absolutely gigantic, magnificent beasts, if you like. So to make sure that it felt authentic, we worked from original deck plans.
Doing this research, was there any interesting facts you stumble upon? Anything new that really surprised you?
I think just the level of detail and the tension that went into outfitting the first class compartments and what was available. The fact that there were pianos, there were, like you really would just think you were sitting in the Savoy despite the fact you were out on the ocean. Absolutely ridiculous levels of detail and opulence, really, for these things. And it's also fascinating seeing how people recorded them and depicted them. There's a fantastic image that I found, which was basically a cross section down through the ship so that you could see how all the levels fitted together. And they're just absolutely marvels of engineering, terrifying. And of course, the Lusitania, the Mauretania, all of them have got very sad history. So that interest is also tempered by the fact that an awful lot of people died on these things.
Call of Cthulhu books, sometimes, most times, I would say, it's based on historical fact. Usually, builds from that and it goes on. Was anything about the story originally like based on specific points of history or anything like that?
So no, as far as I know, it's not based on anything in particular.
Okay, excellent. And so this is a three-part adventure. Three-part meaning that location-wise, or three parts as in like it time skips.
Both, to be honest. Yes, it's in 3 different locations. So the first is on the ship, the second is in a fishing port, and the third is in the Massachusetts backwoods. So you do have 3 locations. Not going to say anything else until we put a spoiler warning up for people to turn off. And then we do have 3 different time periods. We have the initial thing, obviously, which is what happens on the ship and what the investigators discover. A mystery that is revealed after the fact that draws them back in again for the second part, and then the let's deal with everything that's gone before for the third part. So that's the second and third parts follow on quite closely to each other, but technically you could have a slight gap between the first and the second scenarios, to just kind of lull the investigators into a false sense of security that they've dealt with all of it and it's all taken care of.
Would it be too spoilery to ask any favorite NPCs that you enjoyed either reading or writing in this book?
The town that everyone ends up in the second part, Greyport, has some very interesting characters in there. It's very much a sandbox. You get to wander around and meet all the locals, and there are some fantastic people in there. And Paul Fricker wove in a love triangle subplot. So if as a GM you want to complicate your investigators' lives even further, you can do that. I hasten to add, not between the investigators and the NPCs. It's into NPC relationships that can cause the investigators headaches, by throwing in interesting wrinkles to the story.
So I'm always curious about the collaboration aspect of role-playing games source books, especially when there's like multiple authors and editors involved. If I may ask, like, how does for this book, how did that work exactly? Was there like one person that came up with maybe like 80% of the script, and then the editors came in and worked together? How does that work exactly, if I may ask?
So Jared produced the original manuscript. That was then given to Paul to do some developmental editing on, and he introduced, like I said, that the love triangles thing in the second scenario, as well as doing some initial polishing. That was part of sort of training him up for eventually bringing him on as an associate editor. Because Paul is a fantastic rules designer and games designer, but because I was moving over to editing Rivers of London, mostly full time, Mike's always had in the back of his mind about training my successors up, kind of thing. So this was one of Paul's first bites at that particular cherry. And then I came in and did more developmental editing and, like I said, rearranging to just make sure that things flowed really smoothly for players and GMs. Keepers. I've been working on Rivers too long. I have to keep reminding myself it's keepers in Call of Cthulhu. So if I had queries, I would go back to Jared. Obviously, there'd been a bit of time in between, so Jared couldn't always necessarily answer my questions. So I had a bit of free rein in there with Jared's blessing to tweak things as I needed. And obviously, I've worked closely with Paul for a number of years now on various different things. So if there was anything that I needed to ask him about, I could go to him.
What is it about this adventure that would you say stands out from other previous Call of Cthulhu adventures?
With one exception, which I believe, if I remember correctly, is actually in the pulp rules. I don't recall many that are actually set on a ship, at least for part of it. So you really are stuck on that thing. It's a proper base under siege one, which is a nice change of pace. And I think this one is interesting in because it does change. So you've very much got a base under siege type setup for the first scenario. You've got a very sandboxy one for the second scenario, and then the third one is we've got to go deal with this. Let's go deal with the bad guys. Sort of full on, get your hands dirty type scenario. So it's a nice mix of different styles of play, and I think that's an interesting thing to do, and should certainly keep the players on their toes.
So is Order of the Stone directly connected to other Call of Cthulhu books, or does this stand alone?
It is its own standalone thing, but obviously because Miskatonic University is involved, you can use it with the Arkham sourcebook. You can use any Arkham, Lovecraft, sort of Massachusetts, Boston, you name it, any scenarios in that whole area, you can interweave it with. As I said, technically you could run the first scenario, then go off and run something else in Arkham or the surroundings, and then kick the second scenario off by the revelation that that they haven't quite done necessarily as good a job as they thought they did in the first scenario, and it's all kicking off again. So and then you can weave it in and out around other things. You can use it as an introduction to that particular part of the world and establishing your characters, but it's not specifically tied to anything named.
I know sometimes keepers and investigators like new tools, new options in the books. Does this book contain like any new items, like maybe a new monster, equipment, things like that?
A couple of new monsters. You might think you know what you're looking at, but you really don't. It's quite creepy. So I think it gives the keeper some interesting new ways to scare the investigators.
And the art team involved with this, is it the same art team that's worked on the previous books? It looks like the cover, especially the art style, it looks very similarly styled to previous Call of Cthulhu 7th edition books. Am I correct about that, or?
There are some artists that we'd worked with before. We worked with an external art director who brought on a few different people that we hadn't worked with before. So this cover's actually by a fantastic artist called Nicola Silvani, and he's fabulous. Some new artists, some familiar artists, working with the style that obviously Mike's established over the last decade for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition.
Moving away from the book a little bit, I want to get back a little bit to the Rivers of London, if you don't mind me asking.
Mm-hmm.
When Rivers of London first came out, in my mind, I assumed it was going to be like a kind of like a one shot book, but it looks like it's more. Well, the new adventure one in any, but it looks like there's going to be more books coming out. Is that what's if I may ask, what's the future of the line? If whatever you can share.
Well, I always had my plan for world domination through Rivers of London, um, but for reasons which I can't really go into, everything got delayed quite a bit. My plans got put on hold, and we're kind of a year behind where we'd hoped to be at this point. But yes, there are things coming. The domestic is actually the introductory solo adventure that's in the core rules as well. But we made it available last year as its own thing to try and encourage more people to come in and play the game. So you can download that free from chaosium.com and from drive-thru as well. If you want a physical copy, you can print on demand it from drive-thru. If you don't want to go for the whole rule book. So this year, I've been putting out standalone PDFs, standalone scenarios. So we started with Going Underground. The one that just released last week is The Font of All Evil, which was written by Paul Baldowski, with me backing him up. And I'm currently working on another one. That's just gone out for external copy editing. So that will hopefully be released before the end of the year. The plan with those is those three will then be collected together with a scenario that I need to write over the next couple of months, which I've used as a convention game many times, called The Goat Man Is Coming, plus a little extra something that I'm not going to reveal until it happens, just to be on the safe side. And then, yeah, we'll have a collection of those three and a new material as a proper full physical release sometime next year. Before that, though, there will be the US source book, which was originally 2 chapters in the core rules. Originally, what we wanted to do with the core rules was have the core setting and then acknowledge the fact that, you know, there are American characters in the books and America does get mentioned. So one was going to be a setting chapter and one was going to be an introductory scenario. But it became obvious once we got all the material in that it didn't really belong, so we decided to focus on the core London setting for the core rules, which made perfect sense. In the meantime, Ben wrote 2 more novellas set in America that we had the rights to. So Helen and Nash did the vast majority of the original writing, and then once we had the 2 novellas, I then went in and updated that, and we had a second scenario written. So that's now become its own thing. And that will be out sometime next year, hopefully Q1, printing and shipping gods willing, because that's in the final stages of layout and proofing now. And then I've got another scenario book I want to do and other nefarious plans, but I'm definitely not going to mention those. I do have the scenarios for the next scenario collection in. I just need to start editing those.
If I may ask, so it looks like, even though we can't announce too much, but there is definitely a plan. There is things happening.
Oh, there is a big plan. Lots of things happening. I've got Ben working on an outline for a campaign because that's something that I want. I'm chatting to various authors about other things, which I'm not going to mention because, you know, you're cursed the moment you do. We'll keep those as nice surprises for sometime next year.
It's obvious, and I hope I'm not assuming wrong, that you're enjoying your work with the Rivers of London line. If I may ask, how do you work on something that you enjoy without it becoming work to you, or do you consider it as work, or able to separate that? How, if I may ask, how do you handle that?
It's a tricky one, actually, because yes, I do enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy working on the Rivers of London stuff. Ben is an absolute joy to work with. He's very generous and understanding. Thankfully, he's a gamer, so he gets role-playing games. He understands the limitations that you have within a game, the fact that you have to define things in a way that you don't have to in novels. So quite often I'll pick up throwaway lines he's made in a novel and turn them into something, and then he has to go away and we have to get our heads together, and it's mostly Ben, but we have to work out how that actually fits in with the established lore, to make sure that we're not breaking that. So yeah, it is great fun, and it is hard to separate the enjoyment of it as a thing from my job. We don't have the rights to all of the books and graphic novels, so I can sneak off and read those, and that's technically not work, because I can't use them. But I have to read them quickly and then try and forget everything so I don't accidentally use anything from them. At some point we'll get that sorted. Because obviously when we got the license back in, was it 2019, I think, obviously the plans for certain books hadn't been announced, so we couldn't include them in the license. Not that we haven't got a huge amount of stuff to be going on with. But yes, a lot of us drift into working in the gaming industry because it was our hobby. And it does get tricky sometimes to separate work from fun. Let's face it, as gamers, pretty much everything that we read or watch is potential inspiration. So you're never 100% off duty, if you like, except when you're possibly asleep. Although, given the fact I have actually woken up singing rhymes that have ended up in scenarios before now, even then it's debatable.
So, if I may ask, when fans of Rivers of London read the role playing game, what's been the reaction so far?
So Rivers of London fans are very sweet. It's something Ben's spoken about before, is the fact that you can never quite tell who a Rivers of London fan is going to be. He thought he was writing the books for nerds, people like us, basically. But it turned out that there were an awful lot of women and people's mums reading them. He even has a subset of followers he likes to call the gruesome grannies, who complain if there's not at least one gruesome, hideous murder per book. So it's interesting, and the reception we've had has also been good and interesting. My hopes with it was always to bring people who'd read the novels into gaming, which we're certainly seeing evidence for. At conventions, people come up to us and go, "Oh yes, no, not exclusively women, but frequently women, going, oh yeah, no, we'd read the novels, and then we heard there was a game, and I've bought it, and it's great. And either I'm going to run it, or I'm trying to convince my husband to run it for me and my friends, or various people have gone, oh, I bought it for my mum, and so we can get her into gaming because she's never really got it, but we think this is a way to do it because she's a fan of the books. So we're certainly seeing that side of things, which is fantastic, and people seem to be having a lot of fun with it. Apparently it's very popular in Wales. And the Scottish gamers that we spoke to at Tabletop Scotland last weekend, certainly big fans, very supportive, and having a whale of a time with it. But we also saw that our existing fans for Call of Cthulhu picked it up because they're very loyal, very supportive, and we greatly appreciate all of them. And they actually then went out and bought all of the books and read them because they were interested in the game first and then came to the world second. So I'm sure Ben's agent is quite pleased at the amount of sales we've managed to drive in his direction. And Ben's been very supportive in his newsletter, sort of announcing things for us as well. So it's steadily getting out there to the wider Rivers of London fandom. And everyone I've interacted with has been absolutely lovely. Which is, to be quite honest, no surprise really.
Oh, that's really wonderful. It never occurred to me that Rivers of London might be the role playing game might open up to a totally different fan base that have never been exposed to role playing games before. Wow. And wow. Sorry, that's amazing. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the, when I talk to other writers and editors, that seems to be the goal. It's not just put out games for a certain group of people that, of course we want to make our fans happy, but to reach beyond that is always the hardest struggle. And that's amazing. Do you think Chaosium in the future might expand to do more different properties of different novels in the future, seeing how well this is being well received?
You never know. The games industry is a weird thing, and you can never tell. I'm sure if there is a property that one of the owners or one of the line editors is really passionate about, then it's a distinct possibility. I mean, this was my baby, so it's always whenever I'm on a panel and someone says, "So, what's the dream project that you'd want to work on?" It's like, well, I kind of am now. Um, so I know I've been very lucky in that respect.
Hmm.
Um, no, the sky's the limit. I don't see why not.
If I may ask, so if you had a choice to pick a second property, then
Oh, that's
um,
mean. I've been reading actually a lot of sort of translations of Japanese short stories lately, where they're all kind of set around sort of, well, the one I'm reading at the moment is at the Morisaki bookstore. So it's sort of like someone who's having a bit of a crisis in their life, and then they go off somewhere very gentle, and they meet other people, and they help other people, and they learn other people's stories. And then there was one called What You Are Looking For Is in the Library, where this magic librarian basically gives a person a book list, and then something about the book sort of helps them come to terms with something in their lives. So I don't know, maybe some sort of like a gentle, cozy storytelling game along those lines would be interesting to explore, but very small scale, probably something like a solo game, really.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right, well, I guess we should get back to the Order of the Stone. But thank you for sharing your thoughts about Rivers of London and the line itself. But yes, the Order of the Stone. Is there anything else I haven't asked you about that you wanted to share?
No, I can't think of anything. See, the interesting thing with these books is that production can take quite a long time. So I started editing this in towards the end of January in 2023. I finished my edits on it around March, and then that goes off for external copy editing to make sure I haven't missed anything. I worked with a fantastic copy editor on this called Meredith Katz, um, who's very good at finding things and making suggestions so that we can really spice things up and get everything working beautifully. Then obviously it goes for art and maps and handouts, so that takes a good few months, and then it goes into layout. So from me starting editing it in the January, we handed it off all signed and sealed in November of last year. So it's taken a while to actually get it printed and shipped and ready to go, which is always the case. I mean, back in the pre-COVID days, you could get a book turned around and out from sending it to the printers to in warehouses in 3 months. That just doesn't happen anymore. So, and you never quite know when they're going to come out. So it's lovely to finally see this one making its way to shelves. It's part of Mike's plan to release different things. So obviously, we've had Arkham, which is a big source book. We've got this, which is a mini campaign. So we've got Gaslight Investigators book, which will be due out soon, which is a setting guide for the Gaslight Victorian setting, which is fantastic. And obviously we've had Alone Against the Static, which is a choose your own adventure. So it's very much Mike's plan to make sure that there are varied products to maintain engagement at different levels for different groups and different interests. And I think Order of the Stone fits into that very nicely.
And just to be clear, the Order of the Stone. Would you say is it newbie friendly? Is it similar to like the doorways of
Doorways to
oh,
Darkness.
darkness? Yeah, I want to say madness. Um, doorways to darkness. How it's like there are a bunch of intro scenarios. Would you consider this the same way, or is actually more? If you're sort of familiar with Call of Cthulhu, this is a good book to have.
Hopefully, we've set it so that you can run it as an introduction. There are ways to do it with brand new investigators. There are ways to do it with established investigators. So we've tried to pitch it so that it's multi-use for keepers.
One last question: if I was running this and you were one of my players or investigators, what character would you make for this?
Oh,
And I'll particularly run the one that we're out at sea.
oh gosh. Well, personally, I absolutely hate boats. I have chronic seasickness. So the idea of actually being an investigator on an ocean liner is horrific just from the get-go. Actually, one of the pre-gens, and you can see her on the cover, Captain Burney. I'd play her. She's great. I really like Captain Burney. She's the captain of a fishing vessel out of Boston, so she's sort of very no nonsense, sort of tough and organised, and she's a lot of fun. So rather than create my own, I think I'd play her, largely because hopefully she won't be terribly seasick.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about the Order of the Stone and to update us a little bit about what's going on with Rivers of London. Any last words before we wrap up?
Well, only to thank you for having me back again. It's always an absolute pleasure. And I hope everyone is having a fantastic time playing the games that they love and enjoy, and long may you do so.
And I hope everyone enjoys their Halloween. I already have my game ready for that. And
Oh, I won't ask you for any spoilers just in case your players are listening.
So viewers and listeners, thank you for checking us out. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next time.